Everybody, we are back once again here on eXhuming the X-Files on the Outpost Unknown YouTube channel. My name is Matthew. Joining me again for what's going to be a very celebratory, I can't even say the word, episode here is Jeremy.
Hey, everybody.
We're talking Beyond the Sea, folks. This is episode 13, directed by David Nutter. Where did we see David Nutter last? Ice, which we really loved. Written by Glenn Morgan and James Wong. Where did we see them last? Ice. So, where to even begin? I feel like we should just dive into this because this is one of those episodes that is just chef's kiss. I don't even think there's anything necessarily wrong with this episode. I might argue it's a perfect episode. But let's talk Beyond the Sea. Let's just dive in. Give us a setup. What's this one all about?
So the episode begins by us meeting Dana's parents for the first time. Mom and Dad are over for some sort of holiday meal. They take off. There's a loving kind of thing going between all of them, but it feels a little bit more intimate between the mom and daughter, between the dad and daughter. You sense there's some kind of tension in there, maybe about what Dana chose as a lifestyle.
Yeah. The dad is
But
one of those dads that won't say I love you. He's not the one. He's a military guy, right? I think they established that he's a military guy.
Yep.
He's just how's your work going? Okay, see you later. Love you, Dad.
See you at Thanksgiving.
Yep.
So he takes off. Dana falls asleep on the couch, wakes up, and her dad is sitting on the recliner across from her, and he's mouthing something to her. You can't hear a word that he's saying, but he's just sitting there very calm, very serene. He's saying something. Then all of a sudden her phone rings. She goes and grabs it, looks back, dad's gone, and she finds out that her dad just passed away of, was it heart attack?
Yeah, heart attack. The way they filmed that too with the dad, like she wakes up and the dad, it's like completely silent and you just see him. It gave me goosebumps when I was watching it.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my God, like this is really, really creepy. Love this opening. This opening is just, this opening 3 minutes is already a banger, and we haven't even got to the best parts of this episode yet. It only goes up from here.
So we end up finding out that there's a killer. He's on death row. He's fixing to go to the gas chamber very, very soon.
Luther Lee Boggs.
Fox Mulder put him there. His profile had ended up enabling the FBI to capture this guy in particular, convict him, and put him away for life. And he almost did. He ended up walking towards the gas chamber and ended up having this really bizarre experience where all of these ghosts of people that he had murdered had stood in the hallway, like judging him as he went by. For some reason, which I still can't quite discern, he ended up not getting executed at that point.
Yeah, I think they mentioned that there was some sort of stay of execution at the last minute or something. Like, I don't know if a court order came in or the governor, because the governor later on, when Scully goes to try to convince them, hey, don't kill this guy, the governor's like, no, this should have happened before. It was kind of out of my hands at that point. So I assume a court order came in and stayed the execution.
But there was a traumatic experience that he had during that time of almost getting executed that put him into contact with spirits from the beyond. So cut back to a couple of kids making out in a car out at Lookout Point or Makeout Point, whatever you want to call it. It should be noted that the entire car was completely steamed out, which is typical for these scenes that you see as a trope in movies. But both of these kids are completely clothed, head to toe.
Network television.
You do not get that much steam with that much clothing on. I'm sorry, that's just not how it works. Cop pulls up, raps on the window. Typical, step out of the car, son. Gets out of the car. Kid realizes that it's not a cop.
Very Zodiac killer right here.
Right. Then they end up vanishing. So there's a serial killer has been apparently doing this on a yearly basis, and somehow Wade Boggs, our former killer that had been almost or got a stay of execution, had this traumatic event, knows or has information to cough up to the FBI about who this killer is, where these kids are at, he can help them out if he can get his sentence commuted from execution to life in prison.
Yeah, because he's terrified. He's terrified to die. He does not want to go through that. He wants to actually live, which is a great. It's a great thing because you don't really ever see this kind of media in which serial killers on death row are portrayed that they are terrified to die. And we'll talk about, like, Luther Lee Boggs is played by Brad Dourif, and we're going to go into probably the accolades we have for him. We last actually watched him as the exterminator in Graveyard Shift. You
Yeah.
can check out that video here on Outpost Unknown. I will link it in the show notes if you want to hear Jeremy and I talk about Graveyard Shift. But yeah, I love how terrified he is, and there's a monologue he does later on for Scully as to why that is. Oh god, it's just perfect.
So
It's just
good.
perfect. But Mulder doesn't believe him, right? Mulder
Yeah,
thinks he's full
well,
of shit.
that's one of the interesting things that this episode does is Mulder is typically always the believer, the guy that's going to run out and it just accept the unknown at face value and pursue where the truth is, and Dana is the one to rein him back in. But they've actually switched them in
Yeah.
this episode to where Dana she's lost her father. She runs into Wade Boggs and he says things in a certain way, sings a certain song that's very specific to her father
Yeah. Beyond the
that
sea.
says that she didn't get closure when her dad died, and it is really really tearing her apart. And you can see that she wants that. She wants to know what her father has to say, and Wade is kind of dangling that carrot on the stick, like, well, I will tell you what your father had to communicate to you if you make all of this work. Whereas Fox is just like, this guy's just a fucking loon. I put him away. He's just lying to you. None of this is
Yeah.
true.
He's trying to set us up to get us killed or something. Fox believes he's working with the serial killer on the outside. Um, and to get to that point about Dana, which is really cool, is that there's that short little moment, short scene of the funeral, and her dad, because they do the Moby Dick thing where he calls her Starbuck and she calls him Ahab and everything, and Scully and the family are kind of like watching as his ashes are being poured into the sea. And she turns to her mom and she's like, I just need to know, was he proud of me? Like, she has no idea. She's like, I know you guys I know he was not happy. I chose the FBI and did not go into medicine to be a doctor. But he never actually told me, if he was proud of what I've become and what I've done. And then the mom just says, he was your dad. And so that's the
He didn't
driving
really know
force.
either.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the driving force of the entire thing is Scully does not know, and every time they interact with Boggs, it is Brad Dourif throws something out like, "Hey, Starbuck," or he mentions something that only she would know, but she
Mhm.
can't convince Mulder that this is happening and it's true. And there's also that great moment when Mulder, it's later on in the episode, I don't mean to step on that recap too early, but there's a moment when she has to admit to Mulder she lied to the cops about how she found this location, and Mulder's pissed off at her. He's like, "What the fuck were you thinking? Like, you could have went there and you could have been dead. Like, you could have been shot and murdered, and Boggs was setting you up. He fed you all this bullshit so that you would see the signs and go there, blah blah." And Scully looks devastated because she's like, I thought you would be happy that I'd be open to an extreme possibility. Calling back to the very first episode when Mulder is telling her the same thing. Like, can't you, when nothing else makes sense, won't you go to the extreme as the possibility? Open yourself to that. And she's like, I opened myself up and now you're shutting me down. I thought that was a
And
great moment between the two of them.
but Mulder came back at her. It's like, well, of all the things that you could have believed up until
Yeah.
this point, why are you believing the bullshit?
Yeah. Why are you believing this serial killer on death
Yeah.
row sort of thing? It's a great dynamic between the two of them there.
So just before what you're talking about, they go to visit, or Mulder, Scully, they go to visit Wade to try to figure out if he's legitimate or not. Does he have any information about where these kids are? They Mulder opens this little evidence bag, hands him a piece of t-shirt. He goes into this whole weird thing where his eyes are rolling around in his head, and he's sensing about, oh, there's water nearby, there's a waterfall, but it's not a waterfall.
He's so good. Brad
It's a
Dourif is
warehouse.
so
Oh
good.
god, putting on a master class of what a psycho looks like. But he tells them all of these things, all of these little clues about where they are, and then Fox like snatches the shirt back. It's like, I ripped that off of my Knicks t-shirt, you fucking idiot. And then like, we're done here. This clown doesn't know shit. And so they leave. This is the first time that he started singing a song that they were
Luther is his name,
playing.
by the way. Luther Lee Boggs.
Why was I thinking Wade Boggs? Is that a baseball
Wade
player?
Boggs, baseball player, yeah.
Stupid.
He
I
played
think
for
I
the Red
wrote
Sox.
Wade Boggs like every single note that I have here. All right, Luther Boggs. Sorry, not Wade Boggs. Anyway, he starts singing the song that they were playing at Dad's funeral when they were pouring the ashes. Which, getting back to that scene for a minute, it was kind of a pretty scene. It was a good conversation between Mom and Dad. There's the dude out on the boat that was pouring the ashes. Who was the fucking guy pouring the ashes if his wife was still standing on the shoreline? Like, I
I don't know.
understand that Mom needed to talk to daughter in that scene, but who was the old guy in the water pouring the ashes out?
Maybe it was his brother. I
His
don't know.
boyfriend or something? Why would you not give that honor to your wife?
Do you think that Mulder should have been at that funeral? Because there is that sequence when she comes to his office, and I think that's when she makes the joke. Last time you were this engrossed, you were reading the adult video news. I have
Yeah.
that on there, so she's kind of trying to, and he's kind of shocked that she's even at work, and he tells her like, "Well, you need to take some time." And I thought there was kind of a weird interaction there. It was like, I guess through we're up to episode 13 now. I feel like they are so close that Mulder. I feel like he should have been at that funeral, don't you think? Or maybe do you
Well,
think it was just a family, sort of close family only? Maybe.
I would imagine so, because if you remember from that very scene where they're talking back and forth to each other, he calls her Dana. Like, he
Yeah.
says something to the effect of, "You should take care of yourself, Dana." And
Yeah.
as he's walking out, and she like remarks like, "Oh, Dana." Like, "Oh, okay, we're on a first name basis now."
Yeah.
Almost. And that was kind of weird, but also showing that their relationship was getting closer, but like, they haven't done family stuff to each other or
Yeah.
with each other yet. So yeah, I could see that being a little bit more private. Okay, so they leave Wade Boggs
Just
in the
call him
jail.
Wade Boggs from now on. Just do it. Wade Boggs,
Scully
the
is
baseball player.
driving around, and she sees this neon sign that is the Niagara waterfalls, and the remembrance of him saying a waterfall but not a waterfall. And then she saw this stone statue that he had talked about, and then she sees this alleyway with, this rundown warehouse, and he's like, okay, this is all shit that this dude described earlier.
You know what this reminded me of?
What's
This
that?
reminded me of brother Justin seeing all the signs for chins from Carnival.
Yeah.
That brothel place, and he's seeing the cross in the neon signs and stuff,
Yeah.
and all that. That's what it reminded me of.
All right. Yeah, no, that awesome series, by the way,
Oh,
audience.
for
If you
sure.
have not watched Carnival, stop this and go watch it now. But anyway, um she doesn't call for backup. She doesn't reach out to Mulder. She just decides to draw her piece and go into this place all by herself. She ends up finding a pool of blood. She ends up finding this coat hanger that's been stretched out that Boggs had said that was the killer was beating him with. Like, found a crime scene, and so calls it in. Says that she found it. Didn't find any bodies or anything like that, but then goes back to Mulder and says about the belief stuff. Like, she had to admit that she lied to the cops about why she found it
Yeah.
or how she found it. And that was kind of weird, in that all of those things, I think if she had explained in any detail that all of those specific clues that Boggs had thrown out there was how she got there, if she'd explained that to Mulder, maybe it might have changed his mind, but that never happened.
Yeah, I think that part of the issue here, because there was a certain point I was like, why is Scully not going into detail? Like early on when they first are interviewing Boggs and Mulder says, "Hey, this is my next thing," and he leaves, and she first sees, like, she looks over at Boggs and it's her dad sitting there. And then she's like freaks out and she looks back and it's Brad Dourif. Chucky himself is sitting there and he's like, "Hey, Starbuck," or when he starts singing the song. When she originally comes out, Mulder sees that something has happened because he goes, "Did he say something to you?" Like he's about to go in there and beat his ass or
Yeah.
something. Because she's like, "No, no, no, no." So it's like I think that they're trying to convey here that she doesn't want to necessarily say all of this stuff because maybe it'll she's struggling with her own internal dialogue of like, what I'm seeing actually real here? Is it just because I'm in grief and mourning and I don't understand what's actually happening? And but Mulder of all people, you would think that if she opened up and like this is happening, that he would be the one that would believe her, but they don't go that route in this episode.
No. But also, she would have had to say, "Hey, I was in there hallucinating my dead dad over the top of Brad Dourif." So I don't
Yeah.
think that her character would have been the type to readily admit
Yeah.
that
And
she was having problems.
is this the first episode we see her wearing that cross necklace? Because that
Yep.
was very prominent in this episode, and that's a big thing going forward in future seasons. We really focus on Scully's faith, as opposed to Mulder's sort of skepticism, and I think that kind of starts here.
Sure. So I just that whole scene where he was throwing out the prophecy was so good.
Yeah, and that's the cool thing about that whole Nick's T-shirt scene. Everything he said was right. He wasn't like Brad Dorff was not lying. Like Mulder doesn't believe a word that he's saying, but everything he says through this whole episode, other than the one thing at the very end, when you know Dana's like tries to make him think that she got the deal, but he immediately knows, he's like, "Yeah, I knew you were lying." And you could tell just in the performance, because the performance of how he sort of recalls that, channels, whatever, is different than all the other stuff that he does in this episode. It's just
Sure.
awesome.
It's also worth paying attention to. Every single scene that Brad Dourif is in and the people that interact with him, particularly just Fox and Scully, their acting is okay most of the time. They have peaks and valleys here and there, but every scene that both of them or just one of them are in with Boggs, he's acting so hard that it just pulls a better performance out of both of
Oh
them.
yeah.
Their demeanor, the glassiness around their eyes, how they talk, how they act, it's just better because he's a part of that scene.
Yeah, and that's the thing, that's you get the right actors in the right roles, and other actors, you got to elevate. You have to elevate your craft, because if you're going up against Brad Dourif, imagine being Gillian Anderson and David Duchovny in the room while
Yeah.
he's doing this, and you're just kind of like, well, when the camera cuts to me and I got to deliver my lines, I can't fuck this up. Like, I got to focus here, I got to make sure I'm on this level, because if I'm not, it's going to be glaringly obvious that I'm not as good an actor as this guy.
Well, having been on the other side of the camera, and I'm not going to compare myself to the X Files, but when you get into a scene with somebody that's really making the effort to make it feel like you're there, it's easier to put yourself in that same situation,
Yeah.
acting or interacting with this other person in a much more real way. So props to him for just swinging for the fence. There's nothing he says anywhere in this episode that feels like he was just, I'm just on X Files. It's cool. No, he was really, really putting forward a monumental effort, and
Yeah,
it
and the
makes this
cool
whole episode an absolute joy.
Yeah, the cool thing about this, and I'll just throw this little tidbit in while we're talking, is Morgan and Wong fought hard. This is from the Wikipedia. Fought hard to have veteran film actor Brad Dourif play the role of Luther Lee Boggs against concerns about the cost of hiring him. X Files creator Chris Carter called the president of 20th Century Fox, Peter Roth, during Thanksgiving dinner to convince him to let them cast Dourif for the part. So we almost didn't even get Brad Dourif in this because it would have cost too much. And it had to be a Thanksgiving dinner call with the president of 20th Century Fox to please let us cast this guy because it'll be. He didn't even get nominated for an award, which is a travesty. Incredible.
So we go from there to we get a little bit more information out of him because they're lying to him. They're lying to Boggs's character about giving it or getting him out, or at least getting him a stay of execution for a little bit more information. So he just gives it all up. He
Yeah.
says that this dude is out on a boathouse, or what is it, a boathouse or something like that.
Yeah, it's on a lake or the ocean or something. It's some sort of boathouse.
But in the meantime, somebody behind the scenes is putting it together that Boggs knows this killer in real life, and that they are in fact doing this job together, even though Boggs is locked up.
Yeah, because that's Mulder's big suspicion from the very beginning. He believes that Boggs is working with this guy, and they're setting all of this stuff up in order to, make it look like Boggs can actually see these visions and stuff, so that he's helping to get his sentence commuted. And Mulder's having none of it at all. And I'm not sure if it's clear if Boggs actually knows this guy or not. I don't really remember from the episode if they actually
Well,
state that for a fact.
there was a scene where Scully was either talking to a judge or the warden of the prison about getting this guy off, and that judge, who I don't think Fox had talked to at any point during the episode, repeated that
Oh,
he
okay.
knows this guy and that they're in cahoots together. So
Okay.
no, I'm not letting him off. So
Okay.
there
I
was
might have
that
missed.
piece.
Yeah, I might have missed that. I don't remember it.
They get but they bust up the boathouse thing. They end up getting the girl back. They never. It felt like they got both of the kids back, but they ended up just getting the girl back, I guess. And
Yeah, and
Mueller
there's
made off with a guy.
yeah. Boggs mentions also before they go there. He tells Mulder, "Don't go near the White Cross, otherwise your blood will be upon it," which comes to pass because yeah, I think what happened was the what is called the Zodiac for now. The Zodiac sort of killer guy. I think he took the boyfriend, but didn't have time to get the girl, and then of course he shoots Mulder, which basically puts Mulder out of commission for the rest of the episode. And then we get the amazing performance by Gillian Anderson when she heads back to go see Boggs after Mulder's been shot.
Pissed off. Man,
Oh
she was
man,
mad.
it is great. I'll find the audio and I'm just gonna splice it in here. But it is a piece of acting. She does that great thing where she starts low and then by the end of the monologue she's just screaming, "I will flip the fucking switch myself, you son of a bitch!" And I'm just like, holy shit.
Yeah.
We've never seen Scully like this in this show. Never once. Completely different. He's like, and man, I mean, I just can't speak enough to the acting in this episode. It sells the entire premise, it sells the whole storyline, and there's not a whole lot of action really that actually happens. This episode is mostly just talking. It's these three characters kind of just talking to each other, and you're riveted by their performance. And in this sequence, like at a certain point, like because when Scully walks in there and starts yelling at him, look at Brad Dourif's face. He looks shocked. He's like, "What?" Like, I told
Yeah.
you the truth. Like, why are you yelling at me here? And he tells her, he's like, "Look, what do you want, or just tell me what you need." And she's like, "I want to talk to my dad. Like, she breaks down there and she knows, and she's and Gillian Anderson, she's like crying during this, and
Yeah.
she's like her reactions to it are just great. And Boggs does this great thing. He's like, you start to get the channel, and in the middle of like the start, he's like, nobody talks to anybody till I get a deal, and then you go into
Yeah.
that great monologue of why he needs to be saved here. He does not want to die because his whole family was watching him, and how he felt as they walked with him is the dead family, because you find out that Boggs murdered his entire family. I don't know if it was on Thanksgiving or something, and then just finished watching the football game on
Yeah.
Thanksgiving's Thursday, and that he's a total psycho. But how impactful that was to him when he was like literally at death's door, and they were watching him as he was eating his last meal. They were with him as he was walking down. It terrified him, absolutely terrified him.
Yeah, he got just a taste of what hell is going to be waiting for him, and he's like, I want to put this off as long as I can.
Yeah, and it's so good. That monologue is so good.
And so she leaves the cell. She ends up finding, or he does another channeling bit immediately after the yelling about the deal thing, where he lets her know that it's in, what is it, the Blue Devil
Yeah.
Brewery, something like that.
Yep.
Warns her, just like the White Cross bit, that if you see a blue devil, don't go near it or you're going to get really fucked up. And so we go on a kind of a chase scene. You end up seeing the Zodiac killer psyching himself out to. Was that kid tied on his stomach,
I think
bent
so.
over or something? Is he gonna
Well, he's got
butt
those
fuck him while
wires.
he hits him with?
He
Oh, I
whips them with those like wire, like hanger sort of things. Because remember, Brad Dour's like, "Oh, he's got the hanger out. He's got the wires." So I think he was just like gonna like torture them to death by whipping them with these like metal
gotcha.
hangers.
I thought he was dancing around with like a claw hammer in that last scene, just psyching himself out for.
There's also great editing here as well, because when Boggs is saying what's happening, they do quick flashes to this killer and exactly what's happening, and they do this like cross cutting back and forth, but they're brief glimpses. You're not sort of, it's not like Boggs is saying this is what's happening. We get these long extended sequence of the killer walking up and pulling out the metal wire and smacking people. It's just quick glimpses, just like how Scully sees quick glimpses of her dead dad and stuff like that. Just really great editing in this episode also.
And they chase down the killer through the brewery. She sees the devil on the wall, and instead of chasing the killer any further, she just lets him go and ends up finding out that the bridge, like this wooden bridge across a vat or something that was right in front of that Blue Devil painting, was weak to the point it would have collapsed. It collapsed under the guy's weight, and he fell down and got
Yeah.
injured badly. But it probably would have killed her or maimed her out. So
Yeah,
she
oh yeah,
knows
for
at
sure.
that point, she knows beyond a shadow of a doubt that all of this stuff is real. That Boggs know or can talk to her dad. That Boggs knew all of these things, and her belief or in this, that in the pursuit of this truth, has finally been rewarded.
Yeah. And again, I think this is where like her deep seated, sort of religious thing that we see throughout the rest of the series starts, because you know Boggs proves to her that there's an afterlife. She knows for 100% that there's an afterlife at this point.
She does, but the final scene when she goes back and visits Mulder, he's in the hospital because he took a shot to the leg or something. Like real bad artery got opened up, but he was completely out of commission. And they're having that conversation about, the truth and about this stuff. But she's back on the side of being a skeptic again because she's like actively trying to explain a lot of this stuff away
Yeah.
as though that's not actually how everything went down. And I did not understand that part.
Yeah. So to give further context to this, Boggs tells her when she goes back, and she's like, "Okay, I got your deal. Tell me all this stuff." And Boggs like he goes through the motions, whatever. And she's like, "Well, if you would have known," he's like, "I knew you were lying." He's like, "But if you show up and you are at my execution and you're the witness for there, if you show up, I will tell you what your dad wanted to tell you." And so the thing at the very end here, she refuses to go. So we actually see Boggs on the electric chair. The door opens and Scully does not show up. And you just see like the defeat on his face too, and how terrified he has become because he wanted that sort of like person there with him as he died, and she didn't show up. And then you're right. When she goes back to the hospital room, I actually wrote this down. She's explaining this, and Mulder's like, after all the evidence you've seen, why can't you believe? And she says, I'm afraid to believe,
Yeah,
which I think is really indicative of her something, because I think it would be weird for her as a character to be like, okay, boom, I'm immediately like religious, and I'm immediately like, I understand this stuff is happening. Think about all the other previous episodes, or the vast majority of them. Like, for example, Fallen Angel. She's not in there when Max is floating up in the sky. A lot of these episodes, Scully is always written so that she's never there to witness the crazy thing that Mulder does, right? So she never really, firmly believes the stuff, but now she's encountered something that she can't really explain. And I think it makes sense for somebody who has literally just experienced this, and you're trying to tell yourself, wait a minute, I got to be wrong here. I must be wrong here. And the fact that she admits, like, I'm just afraid to believe this fully right now, she eventually comes around to it. But it would be weird if she was sitting there, to me anyway, at that hospital, like, I believe in the afterlife, Fox. This is all real. And, this is sort of now my belief system. I think it makes more sense in the moment for her to be like, I'm afraid to believe. And then it grows over time through other
sure.
episodes.
Now I could buy that. It's just she was trying so hard
Oh, yeah.
to make everything that she just experienced make sense in what her reality was. And it felt like maybe she could have just tucked that away and just accepted it.
Yeah. What makes less sense to me in this scene than her is Mulder's reaction. Because Mulder's stating, like, after all this that you've seen, why can't you believe? It almost makes it feel like Mulder is convinced. Like, she's told him all of this stuff about, this crazy, the afterlife and everything that happened with her dad, and now Mulder's convinced. But then going forward, we don't ever see Mulder believing like in a spiritual afterlife or anything like that I can remember anyway. Maybe we'll come to an episode where they do show that. So to me, I looked at the Mulder dialogue as weirder than her dialogue. But yeah. Just a couple of weird things about this. I thought there was a funny commercial at the very beginning, the spray-on hair commercial. So you get a month's supply for $39.92 back in 1993, which I thought was kind of interesting. Um, Brad Dourif was asked to appear in the episode with only 4 days of preparation. So that's how down to the wire this was to get Brad Dourif. I don't know who they would have got for this. I mean, surely they had someone in their back pocket if he said no. And it says he originally refused because he wanted the producers to give him an extra week to prepare. And while getting into character between tasks, his deep breathing exercises turned his face bright purple. And I think this is a really interesting factoid because this shows what kind of pro Brad Dourif is. Brad Dourif could have been like, oh, sweet, I'm going to be on the X Files. I got 4 days. Okay, cool. I'll cram and I'll be on there. But he's like, absolutely not. Give me another week and I'll knock this role out of the park for you. But I need that prep time to do this role justice, which I think is just a testament to how awesome Brad Dourif is. And thankfully, 20th Century Fox allowed that extra week of preparation. Glenn Morgan and James Wong explained that this episode was written in response to criticisms of the show's initially limited characterization of Scully, Wong said, quote, Gillian Anderson needed to show off her talents more, and this was a perfect opportunity to dispel those notions that Scully will never believe. It was time for the characters to grow, and because she was just doing the same kind of thing too often, unquote. Um, and executives at the Fox network vetoed the idea 2 times before Carter just showed up and said, we're doing it. So Fox didn't even, the network did not even want this episode made. Twice they killed it before Chris Carter said, no, fuck that, we're doing it. So good on you, Chris Carter. The episode is the favorite of Chris Carter, who calls it, absolutely his favorite episode of the first season. And actress Gillian Anderson also said it's her favorite. Co-writer Morgan also praises it as a script he is proud of. The director stated that, quote, I think it's the most accomplished piece of directing of actors I've been able to do. I think this episode really made a difference in how the audience looks at Scully. I think it brought a lot of dimension to her character, and for her person, it definitely had a lot of impact, unquote. So, I mean, I don't know what else there is to say about this episode. Even the creators of this thing are like, this is the greatest thing that we've ever done. Like, we're doing a lot of art on this show. We're writing lots of scripts, and we believe this is the best example of anything we've been able to do on this show. And it's only season 1. And I think that's one of the power of the X-Files is this first season had so many. Yeah, we talk about some of the ones that are weaker, like space and stuff, but so many episodes in season 1 were just like masterpieces, were great. And you knew even before the show got its legs fully under it, like this is gonna, like, when you get to season 4 and 5, this show is knocking shit out of the park every week. This is like high quality television, and at the time literally 40 million people were watching it. You see numbers nowadays where HBO's like, 20 million people watched the latest episode of Game of Thrones. It hit a huge record. It's like, that was nothing in the 90s. I think a lot of people listening to this show might not realize how television worked back then. It was appointment television. You had literally tens of millions of people sitting there in front of a television screen on Friday nights watching this. Look at the last episode of Seinfeld had 100 million viewers. That's crazy. That's
You
crazy.
and you had to be there. You had to, like,
Yeah.
yeah, your chores had to be done. You had to have supper done. You had to not
Yep.
leave to go to the bathroom until it was a fucking commercial break, or you were going to miss it and not get any of that information until somebody told you what happened.
Yeah. And it was a different time. When now there's too much content out now, and people don't, like, I saw Shogun. There's thing like, oh, Shogun got 11 million viewers. I'm like, that is a drop in the bucket to what an episode of X-Files would get in the 1990s. I mean, it's a different time. But yeah, this is. I mean, it's like, to me, it's like a perfect episode for what it's trying to do. It's perfect. I think Brad Dourif should have won all of the awards. At the very least, he should have been nominated for something. The fact that he wasn't is, it's an indictment on the awards process, in my opinion. But what are your thoughts on Beyond the Sea? I mean, this is an A+ episode for me.
If I don't know if you've watched the episodes thus far and you're already enjoying it, once you get into this one, it's just, oh my god, it stands head and shoulders above every episode that's come before it, because from beginning to end you'll just lose yourself. Like, I'm looking at my notes, and this is the least amount of notes that I took of any of the episodes that I've watched previous to this, because I couldn't help it but to sit there and just enjoy what I was watching, because the
Yeah.
quality was just so good.
Yeah, and I did have a couple other quick things here that I forgot to mention as we were talking about it. When Mulder leaves his office for the first time at the beginning, Max's nightcap hat is hanging on his coat rack by his door, which I was like, oh, that's cool. Like,
Oh,
Max's hat's sitting there, he still got it. And I did think it was interesting that Luther Lee Boggs, he actually believes Mulder's the only person that truly knows him, which is why he requested Mulder to be the one to channel all this stuff to him, which I thought was weird because Mulder ends up being the one person who doesn't truly know. Luther Lee Boggs. So he wrote the profile on him that put him away, but Luther Lee Boggs is now a changed person after that initial sort of near-death experience, and Mulder cannot understand it because Boggs is now operating on a spiritual realm now, which is not something that Mulder can see or understand. And I like that kind of element that they threw, like an undercurrent throughout the episode of Mulder and Boggs' relationship. But with that, geez, I think that's it for this episode. It's great. We love it. Go watch it. It's fantastic.
Awesome.
Next week, we are going to be talking about episode 14, Gender Bender. And I have memories of this, and I'm wondering if watching this now in today's day and age, people might find it problematic. But we will see. Gender Bender next week on eXhuming the X-Files. So thank you for listening. We look forward to checking it out.